Trophy is go. The flag falls, the E-Type's rocking away. Mike Grant Peterkin's Cobras snakes off the line. Sluggish start seemingly from the Ollie Bryant E-Type, which gets gobbled up in the pack as they dive down towards Madrick for the first time. It is going to be Gary Pearson that leads the way. On board with Mark Gordon. Carl's to the left of him. He's losing a place, possibly on the outside line, but it is Gary Pearson then who hits the front as they come for the first time in a 1-hour race along the run towards Fallwater. And there the Cobra and Mike Grant Peterkin tries to get up the inside, looking for position as they head up towards St Mary's for the first time. But a really good start by Pearson, not a great start by Bryant.
Another good start from Gregor Fiskin from the second row. He tucked it up the inside into Madgwick, taking a position. He's now running in third, trying to keep pace with the leading duo. Richard Mines ahead in the E-Type, of course. Now there's the top three starting to pull a bit of a gap. Gregor, if he can just tether himself to the back of Richard Mines, and in turn, if Richard, as they all start tripping over each other down into Lavant, that is one of the obvious overtaking opportunities on the lap here at Goodwood. 3 into 1 doesn't always go.
So that going through on the inside was Nick Maton going ahead, and that puts him then in number 10 just up on the inside line. But the top three certainly escaping. So Gary Pearson it is then who leads the way with Harvey Stanley, who's been very impressive day long in this car. There in second place, the two white E-Types dive into the chicane up towards the end of lap 1. We're talking tenths of a second between the two big cats. They prowl their way now past the pits. 1 lap in the book. Gary Pearson sharing with Alex Brundle, leading the way. Second across the line is Harvey Stanley. Third, it is Gregor Fiskin. And then a gap back to them. The battle that's going on with, looking on the inside line there. Look, you can see the Aston Martin of Adrian Wilmot going through on the inside to take the place away from Nick Maton as they go around that right-hander of Madrick. So the Aston, the DB4 GT, up into 4th place, and Adrian Wilmot absolutely on a mission then, just up to the grass.
Yeah, traditionally we've seen Adrian driving that car. He's not afraid of exploring the outermost limits of the circuit width here at Goodwood. Just about hanging on to it there. Nice shot here again as they come up towards No Name. The cars go light over that crest, and then they've got to keep the car loaded laterally so that it's poised, ready to turn into the first part of St Mary's.
2 race leading E-Types then as one, and then in 3rd place Gregor Fiskin hustling along. Richard Mines in danger of losing another place though there, look, because Mike Grant Peterkin in the Cobra tries on the outside line, can't do it. Richard Mines here having to try to keep the car in the hunt so that Rob Huff is able to try and then bring it back into contention in the second stint. The oversteering Cobra there of Richard Woolmer goes through. It's another car that's looking pretty competitive early on.
Holtz there in the glorious Ferrari, short wheelbase Ferrari, number 14. He's dropped back just a little bit off the line. He'll be handing over later to Dario Franchitti. So if Holtz can just keep the car up there in the leading pack, as it were, Dario might have a chance of getting back in with a sniff of a podium later on in this long race.
So we're going to have the two Franchitti brothers going head-to-head after the second stint, Ferrari and E-Type respectively. Right, over the timing line has gone Gary Pearson. He's 4/10 of a second up now on in second place Harvey Stanley, and then in 3rd it is Gregor Fiskin. 4th is Adrian Wilmot. In 5th place now it's the E-Type in the hands of Nick Maton. Then you've got Hans Hugenholtz ahead of John Young, Mike Grant Peterkin. Richard Mines is down in 9th place, and it could be 10th in a moment because Richard Woolmer is right there behind him. But look at that again, that long shot showing the speed of the car, showing what Goodwood is like. And the number 1, 3rd placed E-Type gobbling up the tarmac as it heads now towards St Mary's.
Stanley putting Gary Pearson under a bit of pressure there as they came through the left-hander at St Mary's. Gary, though, a wily fox. He's been around the block a few times. He knows how to make that car just a little bit wider. A little bit of subtle body language that's not really visible to us from the outside, but will be all too visible to Harvey Stanley behind. Pearson just letting him know when, only when, he's going to let up. Give him a little sniff of a gap on the run into Woodcote.
And there Hans Hugenholtz, look at the Ferrari coming under attack from John Young with his E-Type. So John, who has done many a mile around Goodwood, very, very successful historic racer, started off in oval racing in hot rods many years ago, closing right up now as they drop down to Woodcote, turns into the right-hander, trying to hustle on behind the Dutchman in the Ferrari, and in turn also clear off from the Cobra. So Mike Grant Peterkin is the next man in the queue, hoping to be able to close on John Young if he gets stuck behind the Ferrari. The lead gap, half a second. Gary Pearson has just done the fastest lap of the race as they go through, heading now out of Madgwick on towards Ford Water go the race leaders. Up into 9th place, by the way, has gone the red Healy 3000 of Richard Woolmer at the expense of Richard Mines. So Richard here is falling away early on, putting the onus very definitely on Rob Huff. And now, look, John Young starting to really push the Ferrari of Hans Hugenholtz.
Yeah, and recovering slightly from an aborted attempt into turn 1. He had a look up the inside, but it was too little too late. He put a wheel on the grass just in the braking zone. Now he commits. Very last minute lunge, beautifully executed through the first part of St Mary's, gets the pass cleanly completed, closes the door as they turn left, and now he's already exiting with a two-car length cushion. Meanwhile, that puts Hans Hugenholtz under pressure from behind.
So really good move that, wasn't it, to come charging through into 6th place by John Young. Meantime, for the race lead, Gary Pearson cannot shake off Harvey Stanley. There wasn't much to choose between these in qualifying. Remember that the interloper on the front row was courtesy of a Rob Huff time, and back marker there in the way, that is Nick James. So through they come out of the chicane. Now is this going to put the lead in jeopardy? Let's see, because they're going to be almost side by side as they come up towards the line. Harvey Stanley tries to go to the inside line. Gary Pearson covers him off. So Harvey Stanley to the outside now as they go into Madrid, absolutely nose to tail. So Gary Pearson is under big pressure now through the right-hander. Alex Brundle is watching all of this in the pit lane, and he is there nervously watching with Tom Clarkson.
Absolutely fantastic driving from Stanley.
Just a quick analysis of what's going on so far.
Yeah, really watch the race. Gary's done a great start and is leading the race, but we're under, obviously, as you can see, pretty big pressure right now, but he's hanging on brilliantly, and car looks good.
Quick word on the car.
Yeah, all happy with it this morning. Lovely balance. So far so good. Let's just hope everything holds through to the end, and P1's what we like to see.
All right. Good luck with that. You're still in the lead.
Thanks a lot. See you guys.
Still in the lead, but only just still in the lead. As they've got Richard Mines coming under attack. Look for number 21, the Healy of Carston LeBlanc. Then 111, Oliver Bryant. Now, why is Ollie Bryant down in 12th place, Sam? We talked about a bad start, but he's not been able to respond, has he?
I think something must have gone wrong off the line. Perhaps they struggled with the clutch or something. Perhaps he's not got much use of it now. Harvey Stanley still keeping Gary Pearson under huge pressure.
Was that a wisp of smoke out of the back of the Stanley E-Type? Let's just have another look. It might have been tar smoke. Getting a little bit lively, isn't it, as it comes up towards the line now.
Beautiful drift out of the chicane. Harvey, relatively new to historic racing, relatively new to racing full stop, driving superbly. Great performance from Harv the Suave.
So, Gary Pearson, another fastest lap of the race. 0.4 of a second up he is then over Harvey Stanley. And these two just escaping. They're 10 seconds to the good already over Gregor Fiskin. So it's an electrifying pace being put on up the front. Number 48 through there, the Corvette Stingray. That car, the Chevrolet Corvette, I should say. Alan Letts at the wheel of it. Former oval racer, turned Mini 7 racer, turned historic racer. He's under attack from the TVR in the hands of Tim Lazell. Look, as they come up towards the line. So the Chevrolet Corvette just hanging on to its place.
Tim Lazell, the artist, driving very well as well. He was in his 1800 BMW teaser earlier on, doing a very good job in that. Meanwhile, we rejoin Bryant up the inside into Ford Water. He found a bit of pace now from that E-Type, so slow off the line. Stellar driver pairing, Ollie Bryant, Phil Keane.
But at the moment, the onus is on Phil Keane, isn't it, to make amends here, because after that slow start, it's given a lot of time away. It's 34 seconds behind the leading car. That's a huge amount.
Yeah, Martin Halusa, we just got a shot in that glorious CFAX short wheelbase. Not really set up for circuit racing as much as it is for sort of tours and rallies, so he'll just be enjoying gracefully drifting the car around the circuit for the next 50 minutes and 48 seconds.
So the leaders go across the line. The gap is 0.4 of a second between the two. And Harvey Stanley, in a sense, yes, he would like to get the race lead and see if he can pull clear of Gary Pearson. But as long as he can hand over the E-Type to James Cottingham with this sort of a deficit to make up in the second stint, given that James is more experienced in historic racing terms than Alex Brundle, you could argue right now his advantage to the 36 E-Type.
It could be, but it's much easier to be the hunter than the hunted, so Gary Pearson will have his mirrors full of those bright headlights, which I'm sure Harvey has turned on to full beam deliberately, just to keep Gary on his toes. Doesn't seem to be having much effect, though. Gary will have seen it all before. Very poised drive. There's a few strips of tank tape on the radiator just to keep the engine temperatures up. Yeah, you're right, David. A little bit of smoke when the 36 E-Type, yeah, I think there's maybe the bodywork just rubbing on the inside of the rear wheel arch on the left-hand rear corner of the car when it's under load.
So hopefully we don't have to worry too much about that. I'm still mightily impressed by the pace these are doing, because you think there's nobody else on the track. They are now 12 seconds clear of anybody else. As down now towards Woodcote Corner comes this battle between Gary Pearson in the lead of the race. Right there behind him, it is Harvey Stanley then, and the margin between them is still no more than half a second, and it has been like this really since the race started. Now, up towards the timing line, the first 10 minutes are done, and Gary Pearson feeling the pressure very definitely. Harvey Stanley just sitting in the wheel tracks. Another lap ticked off. The gap, 0.349 of a second. Another 10 minutes, and we can think about the pit window opening.
Lovely driving out front from Gary Pearson here. He's picking his moments ever so subtly, defending without compromising his own line too much. He knows that on the run up to Madgwick, he doesn't need to go fully to the inside. Just a little bit of a drift towards the middle of the road is enough to tell Stanley behind, you're not coming through here, pal, wait your turn.
So there is Mike Grant-Peter again, a little bit further back in the pack, but still going strongly with the Cobra, and he's currently in 7th place, going after John Young. So we saw John working his way up past Hans Hugenholt a little while back, and now the Cobra has done exactly the same. These two run together as they now turn their way up through the approach to St Mary's, into the first part of it now, the right-hander.
Navigating their way cleanly past Halusa in the short wheelbase. The lights blaze of dusk is ascending. Bryant again up the inside on the apex at Fordwater. Tom McFadden at wheel of the E-Type. Back with the leading duo now. Pearson still ahead of Harvey Stanley as they go through and out of the chicane. Brilliant overhead shot just a moment ago gave us a quick illustration, a slightly different technique, different lines between the two of them on the way into the chicane, and in fact here as well into Madgwick, Harvey Stanley likes to get a little bit wider, a little bit more over to the left on the entry. That'll straighten the car up through the exit. Conversely, on the way into the chicane, you'll see he takes a shallower, earlier turn-in point, making a little more of a straighter line on the approach, but pays the price on the exit.
So Gary Pearson, the race leader, he did win the Kinrara Trophy, as it then was last year, sharing with Andrew Smith in a Ferrari 250. Harvey Stanley, you've been hearing from Sam Hancock, a newcomer to motor racing in general, never mind historics, but he's doing a really good job staying right on the back of one of the most experienced and, in Revival terms, successful drivers here, Gary Pearson. Is he sitting there just biding his time, waiting for the pit stop, staying in touch, or is he genuinely struggling to find that last 10th? Because if he is going to get past Gary Pearson, it's a major scalp to claim. Gary knows exactly what he's doing and knows exactly how to defend, but Harvey Stanley stays right there on the tail. He's not dropping away, but he's not been darting around looking to make that overtaking move.
Well, they're both driving beautifully, and to me it looks like they're both absolutely flat out. They've dropped the #1 car of Gregor Piskin, who's not even in our shot anymore, so cracking pace, both of them in the low 130s, and that's a good second and a half or so advantage on raw pace alone over the closest challengers of Fiskin and Wilmot.
So again, as one, this enormous white 8-wheeled E-Type, so close to the two leaders, comes out of the chicane then. More and more back markers up the road, including the number 9 E-Type of Mark Gordon that's going to be negotiated shortly. Together they are right under braking there, because the gap right down onto the tail comes Harvey Stanley. It was 0.2 of a second only when they started this lap, and now is the traffic going to get in the way? Stanley perhaps thinks about the outside line, but Gary Pearson, the pioneer, he has got to get through the traffic there. Gets past Michael Birch with the Lotus Elite, the ex-Peter Arundel car. There is Harvey Stanley going through Fordwater. Gary Pearson still ahead of him, but only just as they come to the right-handed part, the first part of St Mary's now. This is lap 10.
Well, the cards can fall either way, in your favour or against, when you're in second position, relying on the leader to punch the hole through the traffic. On the one hand, you hope that the traffic ahead impedes the leader, gives you a little chance to chuck it up the inside, catch them unawares. But on the other hand, if the traffic joins back onto the line in between the two of you and separates the two fighting cars, it's very hard to make that time back up, particularly when they're so closely matched. As Stanley now into the slipstream, closer than we've seen him yet. Having a look, Pearson goes defensive to the inside, Stanley to the outside.
It's really the first time Harvey Stanley has mounted a proper bid for race honours here, and he's all over Gary Pearson like a cheap suit, isn't he, as they come now up through Woodcote Corner, the two of them together, but Gary will position the car exactly right to hang on to the lead. Less than 5 minutes before the pit window opens, this battle is going to go on and on and on. The more sideways of the two there out of the chicane was Harvey Stanley, but he doesn't really lose out as a consequence. He's still got the pace to stay on the tail, and then dive to the outside of Gary Pearson. There wasn't really the room on the outside line. That would have been a brave effort. And so Harvey Stanley slots back in behind as the cars now make this run out of Madgwick, heading up towards Ford Water. But suddenly the complexion of this battle changes, doesn't it? Harvey Stanley looking a lot more towy. He wants to get ahead. He wants that lead.
Yeah, and it looks like Pearson's having to use a bit more of the track width. Perhaps the tyre just starting to go off, maybe slightly over pressure. Struggling to defend now, but for Harvey Stanley, he's forced Gary into a full-on defensive line around the whole lap, which helps him on the way in, but you have to pay for that on the way out with a wider exit when you're the leading car forced into defensive tactics.
Now in this battle pack, further down, there's Richard Mines, there is also Niall McFadden, and there is Oliver Bryant, who, don't forget, was 5th on the grid and is now way back in terms of time. So, yes, it was a slow start by that car, but it may well have a problem because he's over a minute back, and not even a Phil Keane effort can bring that down, I wouldn't have thought.
Yeah, a real shame for those two. I know they had high hopes. They've still got a bit of work to do on the car to extract all of the pace out of it. Ollie was telling me just now in the assembly area, but still, you know, they had the pace for certainly a top 5, maybe even a top 3 finish. So a real shame to see them dropping backwards with some kind of problem.
Yeah, it must be, because Ollie Bryant is not a slow driver, that is for sure, and he's struggling in a sense here to fend off the Healy behind and cast on the block. He's struggling to get past Niall McFadden, racing here for, I think, only the second time as he comes now into the left-hander at St Mary's. And up front, the lead gap still 0.4 of a second between Pearson and Stanley. There's Niall McFadden through. Ollie Bryant still swing away at the wheel. Correction applied as the back tries to wag out, put the power down, and the back tries to step out even more, but the Jaguars here accelerate down towards Woodcote. Richard Mines just rounding out the top 10 in the car that he will give over shortly to Rob Huff.
Yeah, and Huff is going to have his work cut out, isn't he? Obviously, that was another of the front row cars. Started second place on the grid. That would have been a lap time set by Huffy in qualifying, so a lot of work to be done after the driver changeover. Coming into the window soon, actually.
And Niall McFadden here all over the back of Richard Mines. So the Irishman, who will hand over to Paddy Shovlin, former British GT racer and Ferrari Challenge racer. He times go past the pit, then great noise that they all make. Castle LeBlanc there, right up behind them in 13th place in the big Healy. Down towards the right at Madgwick they go. So this battle pack is for 10th and back as they turn through the long right. Richard Mines drifts out wide. Does that give Ollie Bryant a chance to challenge us? Here are the race leaders, still absolutely tied together. Now that gives you an idea of just how far ahead of the Oliver Bryant car they are, because they're at the end of the lap, as up the curb and onto the dirt. There goes Harvey Stanley.
Yeah, he'd have lost some momentum. He'll have to check the throttle, lift out of it, gather the car up. Just went a little bit too wide on the throttle out of the chicane there. That's given Gary some breathing space into turn 1 at Madgwick. But how long for? Because he has to navigate his way past the traffic. Stanley will be tucking in behind, hoping to take advantage of Gary's hard work as he punches a hole through the back markers.
So onto Ford Water they come. This is lap 13, 41 minutes of the race to go. And there is Alex Brundle getting ready. A big off there. That's the Lotus Elite, I'm afraid, of David Clark. And also off is the 142 Ferrari of Martin Halusa. And Gary Pearson is involved in all of that. The race leader with big damage. I'm afraid Alex Brundle sees the pictures. Oh no, he says, because that is his car. And the race damaged. He's denied a chance to get on board. What triggered all of that? Because that has taken 3 cars out of the race. And I rather fear that that was getting through the traffic. Back markers, wrong place, wrong time. Possibly we'll hopefully be able to piece it together. And so Harvey Stanley will pick up the lead, Sam.
Now keep an eye out for strategy here, because that will surely trigger a safety car. If the pit window opens, which it is about to do any second, the more BDI drivers will dive straight in to try to take advantage of that safety car, because as soon as it is thrown, they're not allowed to pit under the safety car.
Indeed.
But if the window opens before the safety car is called, they can duck in, and as long as the driver change pit stop is underway, when the safety car is officially declared, they can carry on and take advantage of the pause in racing. There it is.
Indeed, there is the safety car, and the pit lane is therefore closed whilst the safety car is on track. So we saw this process earlier on in the day. If the safety car is deployed and doesn't pick up the leader, the green light will go on. Now, how did we get to where we got to? Gary Pearson there goes through ahead of Harvey Stanley. And there's the Lotus Elite. Gary goes to the inside, hits the Lotus and hits the Ferrari. Oh, big damage to the E-Type. That fires David Clark off the road. So there's the damage on one side. So Gary Pearson goes for a gap, which kind of closes, cannons off the Elite into the Ferrari. Big
and
damage to the E-Type. Yeah, hits the Ferrari, bang, the Lotus Elite. Gosh, the front actually ripped off that car. So that, I'm afraid, is a big mess, that Elite. So that car parked by the side of the road, and that's why the safety car is now out, so that the cars can be retrieved.
I feel a bit of sympathy actually for Gary Pearson on that, because he went up the inside at the exact moment that the Elite ahead would, under normal circumstances, just have waft drivers left a car's width or so, opening up a very reasonable gap for which he had enough closing speed to cleanly pass by the apex. But I think the Elite was maybe trying to be helpful actually, or just turning in on a slightly different line to the one that you might reasonably expect as the following driver. The Elite just tightened his line, which would have caught Gary unawares, having already committed to that inside.
Well, David Clark, I think, bore the brunt of that, with that Elite going into the barrier. There he is, he's okay, shaking his head, not impressed, of course, but he's okay. Gary Pearson's car with a lot of damage on the left front after hitting the Halusa Ferrari, Martin Halusa's car, that's the 250 GT short wheelbase. There's the confirmation that the pit window is suspended, so the race carries on. But actually what this does is twofold. It brings all the gaps down, and then it gives your gun for hire less time in the second part of the race. If you were thinking of pitting early, well, you can't, but it's going to give that driver less opportunity after the stops.
Well, critically, just to pick back up on what I was saying earlier, I think the safety car was called just before the pit window opened, which meant that nobody is able to take advantage of the safety car. The rules this year don't allow you to pit as long as the safety car is out. Traditionally, that has not been the case. You'd normally have a flood of drivers in there now, clogging up the pit lane. Instead, they're going to have to wait. And of course, also, this means, as we said before the race, if you had put your hot shoe out first and they had built up some kind of an advantage, track position, what have you, all of that will now be undone because of this safety car.
So that is why many a team elect to put the quicker driver in seconds. That looked like an overtake to me as the cars came out of the chicane. Let's see. But the number 9, Mark Gordon, E-Type in the queue you're riding with. Coming out, number 90 is the John Young E-Type, which is on a different lap, in fact, yes. So number 9 E-Type have gone a lap down, and perhaps there's now some debate through the semaphore as to who should be ahead. So the safety car on track, Mark Gordon looking across, and there goes John Young, to get his place back and also to get past the Cobra. So not quite what was expected. Now, he was behind the Cobra when he came across the line, was John Young, so not quite sure why he's overtaken it there, are you?
He may feel that for some reason they drove by, I don't know, maybe he lifted off or he needed to address an issue and they went by when they shouldn't have done. I'm not sure, but the rule says 5 car lengths from the car ahead is the maximum gap that you should allow. So if anybody drops back too far, it's not a surprise to see the following cars overtake. But in doing so, they definitely risk a penalty, because that is not written into the regs as something that you're allowed to do.
Exactly right. So the car with the fastest lap there, you can see on the graphic with the purple clock next to it, the retirement, Gary Pearson. It's very rare you find Gary damaging cars. That's a rare moment. As you say, the gap just at the last minute just seemed to not disappear, but certainly narrowed, didn't it?
Yeah, it's tough for everybody involved in that, because, of course, Gary and Harvey Stanley were embroiled in that fantastic battle where every 10th will have counted. And we were just saying a minute ago that it's quite tough to be the leader, the first one to come across the back markers and try to pick a hole through. Gary won't have wanted to have lost any momentum and had been decisive throughout in doing so. And just, I think, 3 or 4 cars on the same bit of road, they're all going into a very tricky corner where the speed is so high and the cars are so light on their feet. It's very hard actually to reposition the car in that part of the circuit if you need to adapt your line to compromise it and give another car around you any space. You haven't actually got that much control with the speed that you're carrying into the first part of St Mary's. Once you've committed to that line, which is something you choose somewhere around the exit of Fordwater, to be honest, a few metres later perhaps, it's hard to make adjustments thereafter.
Well, as we were saying earlier, this does really bring now number 111 E-Type back into the mix, because from being over a minute adrift, you're now looking at about 20 seconds back, Oliver Bryant to Phil Keane. The downside for Phil is that there's less time of the race that he can make a difference for if and when we get the cars through the pit window. But the cars for the moment are continuing, so the pit window will open as soon as the track is clear. But right now the lights stay on atop the safety car. Everybody's staying out on track, and it is, of course, now Harvey Stanley leading the way from Gregor Fiskin and Adrian Wilmot third in the Aston Martin.
The other thing, I wonder, that little Lotus Elite will have been able to carry a lot of speed through that apex at the first part of St Mary's, probably not needing to brake as early or as much, as the E-Types were a little bit heavier and arriving a little bit faster. I wonder if that just created just enough confusion to trigger that whole incident.
Could well be. So the cars here turning up through St Mary's, and the race order, as I say, Harvey Stanley from Gregor Fiskin from Adrian Wilmot, 4th now Mick Mason ahead of John Young up into 5th, 6th Mike Grant Peterkin, and 7th now is Hans Hugenholtz ahead of Richard Warmer. Hans Hugenholtz car 7th to be taken over by Dario Franchitti, and Dario is with Tom.
Well, Dario, it's the big wait. How long's the safety car going to be out? That's what we're all asking.
I think that's what everybody in pit lane's asking here. They're all waiting, and as soon as the safety car comes in, I think pit lane's going to get very, very busy.
No, what's your take on the race so far?
It was interesting. Real shame that the incident happened between the leaders there, and that beautiful Lotus Elite getting damaged was really sad. But much different mix of drivers now going in, so we'll see how things go.
Dario, can you quickly show us? So what happens? You've got your own seat.
I've got a booster cushion because Hans is quite a bit bigger than me, so I've got a booster cushion too, so I can reach the pedals with the steering wheel.
That's fantastic. Good luck. Thanks, Dario.
The circuit is clear, and the safety cars staying out for the moment, as the cars then turn their way up through Madgwick. So still the lights on. When the lights go out on top of the safety car, you know it's set to peel in. But with 3 cars, I think, to retrieve, yes, because the Ferrari also ended up stranded trackside, it's going to be a fair few minutes, and we're almost at the halfway point now. So everybody waiting for the situation to be as a point where the pit lane can open. That's the Ed Foster MGB, the Roger Eniver Alec Poole car that he shares with Nick Padmore, the fastest man, as we know now, around Goodwood. Improved upon his lap record earlier on in the day.
Now, of course, strategy is going to play a key part again now, because as soon as the safety car comes off, expect to see a flurry of cars head straight into the pit lane. The window, remember, is open, but access to the pit lane has been temporarily closed until the safety car has ended. The problem is, if you come into the pit lane at the same time as everybody else, there's a good chance you're going to get bulked with traffic, either coming into your sort of designated parking bay, as it were, where your co-driver is waiting for you, or you're going to get bulked on the way out. Now, driver change speed itself is no longer a factor this year. There is now a 2-minute mandatory pit stop time. Stopwatch on that starts on the way into the pits and finishes as you exit the pits and cross the exit line. Therefore, there's plenty of time to do a safe and relaxed driver change in the middle. Also, it's been allowed just for a bit of sanitation of the cockpit area in this COVID era. So don't be surprised to see a quick cloth giving a wipe down of the steering wheel and the gear lever and so on, and that gives the drivers plenty of time to strap in and get comfortable. But what they do need to do is pray there is nobody directly in their way and balking them from pulling cleanly out of their parking spot.
Yes, it's one of those situations where you have to get on with your neighbour, isn't it? So that you can quickly escape the pit when it is the moment so to do. Safety car staying out, of course, for a little while longer whilst this incident is attended to. The natural line just starting to dip a little bit more. They're going through is Adrian Wilmot with the Aston Martin, the DB4 GT, Tom Alexander's car that was sold first to an American market. There, the rest of the field come pouring through. The TVR goes through. There is Alan Letts with the Chevrolet Corvette. It's the car owned by the author Peter James, but it is going to be Chris Snowdon's local driver who will take over. Pat Blakeney-Edwards good to go, so you can expect whatever it is he gets into to be sideways. It'll be the AC Cobra and Mike Grant Peterkin that he will take over. Somebody else watching all of this, having been out in the Formula 1 demonstration earlier, Esteban Gutierrez. Tom Clarkson has found a very interested spectator, Tom.
Yeah, interested spectator. How are you enjoying it?
I'm loving it. I can't believe how much they push with these cars. They're so beautiful. There's not many of them exist. So it's great to see this. It's amazing.
Now, do you have a favourite car in this field? They're all pretty priceless, really.
Yeah, I mean, there's some very nice Jaguars, very beautiful looking, very elegant. And they're quick. One of them is leading.
Absolutely. Now, when I say the name Stirling Moss to you, what does it mean?
It's a big heritage of motor racing. It's really English motorsports heritage is all I can think of.
And with your corporate head on, he won his first Grand Prix, the British Grand Prix 1955, in a Mercedes.
Exactly. So
I took the words out of your mouth, didn't I?
No, it's great. It's great to see how important this event has become, and obviously the tribute to Stirling Moss, and to be here and to present that and what it means to the UK motorsports in general. It's really nice.
All right. Well, enjoy the rest of the race. Thanks, Esteban.
Thank you very much.
Green flag waved, we are back racing then. So the pit window is open now for 20 minutes. And you can see just how busy it gets down there. First of all, you've got to find your team. So there are drivers leaping out, saying, come on, park here. Chris Snowdon there in the black overalls, ready to take over the Chevrolet. Hans-Hugo Holt's dragged out of the car by the team and by Dario Franchitti, who gets his little booster seat, as he was saying, ready to get on board. In gets the Scotsman.
Yeah, we saw a lot of the leaders there carrying on, and I think that's the right strategy. If you've got good pace under you, take advantage of the clear road ahead, take advantage of the quieter circuit as half of the field duck into the pit lane for 2 minutes to do their driver change, and just go and bank some qualifying pace laps to get a bit of track position, and then do your pit stop a little later in the window, hopefully coming into a quieter, calmer pit lane.
Now that battle you're looking at is for second, third and fourth. Gregor Fiskin ahead of Adrian Wilmot, ahead of Nick Mason as they come now down towards Woodcote, getting themselves through the traffic, putting a lap on Ed Foster, going nicely with the MGB. Pit stops are cycling through. We've got Richard Mines in as well, Niall McFadden in to give way to Paddy Shovlin as well. So the order will be somewhat jumbled for the next few minutes. It is still a 20-minute window, so the time after the window closes will not be much up towards the checkered flag. But let's concentrate on this battle for the moment. Gregor Fiskin staying out, Adrian Wilmot going after him. Then you've got Nick Mason and also John Young, and then the Aston Martin goes to the inside line down towards Madrick, quivering under braking. Adrian Wilmot tries to get up alongside, but he can't really do it there. The two of them turn through the corner absolutely together. Good defence by Gregor Fiskin, still being able to hang on to the place.
Really nicely done by Gregor under the brakes. Just managed to chop in front of the Aston Martin and came out on a good, proper, normal racing line, giving a good slingshot up towards forward water and a nice car-length cushion already.
Ed Foster falls out of his MG, gives way to Nick Padmore.
Ed Foster is really not designed for as little a car as the MG is.
No, of all the things he could have chosen, the mind boggles. Right, now back on track. Other battles, this is John Young, number 90, who has just got himself up into fourth place at the expense here of Nick Mason. So you've got a reversal between the two E-types for fourth and fifth places. And out of all of this, did Ollie Bryant pit? Yes, he did. So Ollie Bryant, number 111, in to give way now to Phil Keane.
And this is really playing into the hands of the leader, Harvey Stanley, and the James Cottingham E-Type, because not only have they got a nice clear road around them, but also their closest challenger, Gregor Fiskin, that we're looking at now in the #1 E-Type, is getting embroiled in a battle with the Aston Martin of Wilmot behind. Those two holding each other up just a little bit, and that is allowing Stanley to pull away. Does he pit this lap? No. Committing absolutely the right decision. Look at the road ahead. There's nobody there. Stanley's had fantastic pace from the start. He just needs to reel off some flat-out laps at 100% qualifying speed.
In comes then Gregor Fiskin out of second place. Up to second goes the Aston Martin of Adrian Wilmot. Up to third goes John Young, and in there is Gregor Fiskin to give way to Marino Franchitti. Remember, it's a 2-minute pit stop, so the cars do sit there for a long time. It makes the pit stops much safer in a sense. There isn't the freneticism, which means that things can go wrong, or belts can not be done properly, or can get in the way of anybody else coming in. It's all a bit more controlled with this pit in to pit out time, and also it's a good way of policing it. You can't really police how long the car stops at its pit box for, but you can police from the timing loops 2 minutes line to line.
Very much so, and most of these cars will have pretty straightforward stopwatches taped to the steering wheels, and it's up to the so we see a wheel on the grass there from Nick Mason. Yeah, so most of the stopwatches will be fixed to the steering wheel, and the driver has to remember as he turns into the pit lane, crosses that timing line to start it, so that the incoming driver can watch it as he's being strapped in, gauge the time it would take him to drive up to the end of the pit lane, and they'll pull away with something like 5 seconds to go before 2 minutes is up, and manage their speed accordingly down pit lane, within the speed limit of course, so that they don't cross the exit line too soon.
Is the leader in this time? No, there was more arm twirling as more opposite lock was needed from Harvey Stanley, who is becoming very adept with this big cat, isn't he, as he goes across the line. So he's going to stay out seemingly to the end of the window here, building up the lead all the time. And let's see what James Cottingham's job is going to be to preserve into stint 2. In now comes John Young to give way to Jack Young, his son. And James Cottingham there walks across the pit lane, so the stop is imminent.
And of course no radios in any of these cars. They'll all be receiving their instructions from the pit boards hung out over the pit wall, and James Cottingham will be directing those instructions. He knows that Harvey Stanley's got fantastic pace. He knows the road ahead is clear, and it is absolutely the right thing to do to keep Harvey out as long as possible into the pit window.
So John Young relays son Jack. There is Dario Franchitti coming through in Hans Hugenholtz's glorious Ferrari that howls its way up towards the timing line, and meantime it is 9 seconds between Harvey Stanley and Adrian Wilmot for the lead. Now this is Marino Franchitti versus Rob Huff. This is a battle to savour, is it not? And this is for position now as well. So Franchitti Jr. versus Huff in the E-Type. Franchitti Minor, I suppose I should say. Going up now towards St Mary's. So the Gregor Fiskin car versus Richard Mine's car, but now with the guns for hire behind the wheel.
Wow, talk about being thrown right into the deep end, out of the pit lane and into the thick of a battle like this. Two world-class professionals at the wheel of each of those cars, and in comes Harvey Stanley, our leader, to hand over to James Cottingham.
So down the pit lane comes the race-leading car, as a sideways Huffy tries to find a gap to get past Marino Franchitti then, as the two of them run absolutely nose-to-tail out of Lavant, the leader into the pits, and also that will give another lap to Adrian Wilmot. He will inherit the race lead. Now what can Huff do? Is he lined up for a go on the inside line? They go down towards Woodcote. We look elsewhere at charging Dario Franchitti, coming up behind Nick Padmore in Ed Foster's MGB. Yes, Huffy did go through, so out of sight, he's done it, he's got the move, and he got the job done. So Rob Huff gains a place at the expense of Marino Franchitti. Of course, that safety car, to an extent, helped this car as well, didn't it? Because it meant that Rob didn't have as much time to make up in stint 2.
Well, remember, of course, from the grid, from the qualifying session, the Huff car definitely had the legs on the Franchitti #1 E-Type behind it in terms of raw pace. And I wonder if Marino just took a bit of a strategic personal decision there, thinking, you know what, I can either hold both of us back by getting overly defensive, or I can just gently let him by unimpeded on the straight and get my head down and just concentrate on extracting the most pace from my own car as I can until the checkered flag.
And this was the overtake, this was the move. Rob Huff lined it up beautifully. In fairness, Marino Franchitti gave him racing room, didn't he? Up the inside went Rob Huff, and the new Scandinavian touring car champion got the job done nicely.
Yeah, that's what I mean. There wasn't really any need or any decision to defend at all there from Marino, and I think he knew the inevitable was coming, and it makes more sense to get it out of the way, get it done, so that he can just have a clean run, get his head down, bang into lap times.
So the stops cycle through. James Cottingham gets on board. Quick wipe of the windscreen. So where is his battle going to come when he rejoins? Is it going to be against Rob Huff? Can Huffy get close enough? Because of course he out-qualified the Cottingham car, not by much, but he did. And the 2 minutes coming towards the end as James sits patiently, gets a thumbs up. So he will come out in the lead, but it's going to be interesting to see whether Huffy can close that gap, as away goes Cottingham now. To the chicane comes Huff. Really? So he's up to speed, isn't he?
Sorry, I was just going to say, what spectacular driving style from Rob Huff. He's not afraid of getting that car totally sideways. He has to start looking out of the side windows to navigate his trajectory if he carries on like that.
Well, he's just done the fastest lap of the race. This is game on. Rob Huff, 1 minute 30.029. Up now to the fastest lap of the race as the sunset shot there. Look at that, wonderful pictures here from Goodwood SpeedWeek. Fastest car on track. Rob Huff setting off now in pursuit of James Cottingham. James fresh into the car. Rob has done a couple of laps, so he's into his stride, and this is the car that he's chasing. So this is building up nicely.
Well, a long way ahead though, isn't he? A good corner or two.
Yeah.
Just looking in the back of our shot there to see if there he is. There's Rob Huff in the background coming out of St Mary's just as James Cottingham is turning into Lavin. That is quite a gap, but if Huffy keeps up the sort of pace that he's just set at 30.0, he could be on the back of the leading E-Type within a couple of laps.
Tyres howling in protest then as Rob Huff terrorises tyres through Lavin corner. Behind him in third place then, number 1, which is now Marino Franchitti. And we've got just under 19 minutes of the race to go as the cars here come down now towards Woodcote Corner.
Stunning sunset here, descending over Goodwood. Now, as lovely as that is for us watching, it's a nightmare for the drivers when they come out of Madgwick. They're blinded by the sun all the way up to Fordwater and through it. Fastest corner on the circuit, effectively blinded by the sunlight. Steering activity here. Who are we riding on board with?
Charlie March, I think in number 9 E-Type, was taken over, has he not, from Mark Gordon. So this is the car in 20th place. Down the gear, turns in.
Charlie's got his work cut out, hanging on to that E-Type.
A lot of that to go.
It's like hard work.
And something else that's great about this, you look at what's going on in the car. Yes, there are dials and switches, but also there's the key and the key fob there as well, isn't it? Never mind these electric starters. So Adrian Wilmot, this is the leading car, the Aston Martin, but it's yet to stop. Another lap will be completed, but is it going to be done in the pits this time or on track? Because the window is, of course, ticking down. Just in restoration.
How much of the pit window is left?
It opened at 17:39, so 17:59 should be the close, and it's 17:50 on the time of day clock.
So we've got plenty of time.
Yeah. So another 4 or 5 laps maybe. And Adrian, I think, is the quicker of the two, in fairness, out of him and Tom Alexander. So from this team's point of view, yes, keep him out there, keep the laps are coming. Now the gap between James Cottingham and Rob Huff last time was 5.2 seconds, and Rob Huff was considerably quicker because, of course, James had a standing start from the pit lane. So we'll need to see at the end of the next lap what the flying lap times are like. James Cottingham has just got over the line and done a 1:31.2, and Rob Huff has done another fastest lap at 1:29.9, so the gap is 4 seconds between what are really first and second out of those that have made the pit stops. There is Rob Huff. He still could win this race.
No doubt at all. All he needs is another 3 or 4 laps, and he'll be right on the back of Cottingham. However, if Cottingham catches any traffic whatsoever that holds him back, Huff will be right there to capitalise.
So the back markers are going to play a part in all of this. So is the natural pace of Rob Huff. Further back, Pat Blakely Edwards is up into 5th place on the road now, ahead of Jack Tetley. Dario Franchitti is 7th, and Marino Franchitti, of course, still upholding family honour in 4th overall. But it remains James Cottingham, who lost out in the first sector of this lap to the tune of 0.3 of a second. Yeah, the gap is coming down and down and down and down. Rob Huff has got a race win in his sights here.
Really has, flicking that E-Type around beautifully. You'll just notice as he loads up the car, he gives a flick of turn in, and then he has to correct it a little bit, get the rear sliding, pivot the car in toward the apex, and then when he unloads the front end, comes off the brake, that's when a quick waft of understeer will set in, easily neutralised, of course, by a big boot of the right foot.
So Rob, who lives in Dubai these days, has been racing in the Scandinavian Touring Car Championship, which he's won these last few months, and now back in the UK, his father here to cheer him on. Peter himself, a racer in MGBs many years ago. Over the timing line, what's the gap between them? 2.5 seconds. So it is getting closer and closer and closer all the while between these two, as Huffy continues to charge on behind James Cottingham. Meantime, Adrian Wilmot still leads on the road and has still yet to make a pit stop.
True, and behind the battle of Cottingham and Huff is Marino Franchitti, keeping a watching brief, isn't he?
Yeah.
His pace very good as well, in low 31s at the moment, just at 30.8 earlier on.
Huff has just taken half a second out of Cottingham in the first sector alone, and both of them lapping quicker now than Adrian Wilmot. So even though the Aston leads on the road, and yes, I've been saying it has to make the pit stop, they're still catching in real terms anyway.
Rob Huff just getting a little impeded on the run into Lavant there as they pass the short wheelbase. I think that might be... Is that Dario's car? It might have been.
Possibly, yes. Number one there is the Marino Franchitti E-Type. Still pressing on.
I wonder if we'll give a little wave to brother Dario as he comes by.
See, there's the car that's leading on the road. Still to make its pit stop, Adrian Wilmot goes through, and there was a board. But Adrian has still got 5 minutes left before he really has to panic about pitting. Now, lower down the order there, look, is number 7 E-Type, which is now Sam Todd off the wheel of it. How is Ollie Bryant Phil Keen's car doing? It's still only in 8th place, so even the lifeline of the safety car hasn't really helped him, has it?
Yeah, I'm fascinated to know what kind of mechanical gremlins they've been struggling with. Chassis-wise, it looked okay. It just seemed to have perhaps a lack of power for some reason. It wasn't very leggy on the straights.
Now the gap between Cottingham and Huff is 1.3 seconds. So there they are. It's not going to be long, is it, before we have this change between the two of them. I think for the race lead, Rob Huff on the limit, and he's hunting down James Cottingham. So the difference in terms of a lap time for the grid was only a tenth over one flying lap. But the pace that Huff has got lap after lap after lap is bringing him closer and closer all the time. But also now we're getting quite a lot of cars under investigation for a short pit stop, and one of them is James Cottingham's car, one of them is Ollie Bryant's car, one of them is Rob Huff's car. So all of a sudden the battle for the lead, yes, it might get lively on track, but the officials could be applying penalties post-race. Let's see.
Well, that could play beautifully into the hands of the Fiskin Franchitti E-Type. Their race number not under the list of those being investigated by the stewards for short pit stop, meaning that they exited the pit lane before 2 minutes from the moment that they entered it.
And the penalty that you get is double the shortfall. So if you were under by 5 seconds, for example, you get 10 added to your race time. So it could be interesting to see by what people were under, if indeed that is what it is. But we'll await confirmation then as the race goes on track. The gap between the two effectively leading E-Types, 1.4 seconds. Huff closing there onto the tail of James Cottingham. Ironic that in a sense that number 36 E-Type should be one that is being looked at, because we'd seen on board, hadn't we, the thumbs up from James as the team was preparing to release him.
It's ever so hard for the drivers to judge though, because once you're released, if you exit your pit sort of box, as it were, just a little too soon, unless you stand on the brakes right before the end, it's hard to judge exactly when the clock is going to strike 2 minutes.
True enough. So it can come back and bite you, can't it, as there James Cottingham presses on. So again, part of the interest now is going to be where number 5 Aston blends back in after its pit stop, and indeed whether any penalties are going to give that another lifeline before the very end. So Huff, what he can do for the moment is just drive flat out, see if there is a penalty looming, whether that can be overcome before the very end. We've only got 11 more minutes to go. So Tom Alexander, actually, if he's not as quick as Adrian Wilmot, he doesn't have that many laps to worry about, does he? He's not going to lose too much time over his stint, because it will not be a very long stint after all.
Well, actually, the one in the pound seats is Marino Franchitti, isn't he? Because if the two cars ahead of him, Cottingham and Huff, do both get penalised, they might come out roughly where they are now in relation to one another. Meanwhile, that will release Franchitti.
So there over the line goes Adrian Wilmot. Yet another lap ticked off for him. So look back to the race leaders, the real race leaders. Cottingham and Huff go through. Now, of course, they're a lap down because of the need to serve their pit stops. On the leader, glowing brakes now on James Cottingham's car, just to add to his woes.
Yeah, he's going to need to watch that because we've still got a good 10 minutes of the race to go. Bright red disc, still bright red, long after the corner, and with a very high-speed airflow going through them as they run up through Ford water. That pedal is going to be getting very long, particularly on that heavy stop down into Woodcote Corner at the end of the straight.
So this car may find itself in the lead of the race once penalties are applied. It depends, A, if there are penalties coming and to what extent. If it's only a second or two, then it isn't going to help it. But if it's more draconian than that, then it will. So we'll have to find out post-race. And there is Dario Franchitti, still behind his brother, of course. And we'll wait and see where that car is going to be when penalties are applied, if indeed they are recovered. Still under investigation at the moment, of course. So Adrian Wilmot leads on the road, but has yet to serve the pit stop, but he's lapping a good 3 seconds a lap slower at the moment than James Cottingham and Rob Huff. So the car in real terms is going to be dropping down the order anyway, no matter what Tom Alexander does in that second stint. So just under 9.5 minutes of the race to go. Hopefully the news on these short pit stops will be given to us within the next 9 minutes, because we're keen to know who has got what, if there are any penalties, and what that's going to do to the race order. So down they come into Woodcote. There is number 14, Dario Franchitti, 5th at the moment, and being chased by the 4.2 litre. You can't have the full 4.7 in the pre-63 set. It's got to be the 4.2 litre engine in the AC Cobra, and that's Pat Blakeney-Edwards at the wheel of it now.
Yep, Blakeney-Edwards looking to close in on the short wheelbase of Franchitti, but funny enough, both Frankittis, I was just thinking, driving their respective cars beautifully, particularly Marino in the E-Type, but absolutely perfect as he came through the right and then the left of St Mary's, everything looking very poised and under control.
Now, where in all of this is the race leader on the road? Because the pit window is going to close in 20 seconds time. So if that Aston has not yet got in by the time we get to 56 seconds, it's going to look perilous for them here. They could get a penalty for not pitting within the window. There's the E-Type battle, which is about to go, I suspect, the way of Rob Huff, as they now come down towards Woodcote Corner. So hard on the brakes, Rob getting closer and closer. His brakes looking pretty orange as well. But here is the Aston, and I reckon they've missed the window because the pit window was closed. Yes, it's closed, and the car's not in, so they missed it. Penalty will come. The Aston Martin arrives a lap late.
Unbelievable, they had all that time.
There's the sign, there's the confirmation of it. So, yeah, not only did they have the time, but it was almost superfluous keeping the car out because it was losing time anyway against the leaders. So Tom Alexander will get in, but I'm afraid, chaps, you've come in a lap late.
Not sure what the penalty is, but I guess it's going to be pretty heavy. It's a very clearly defined regulation. Meanwhile, I'm worried about those glowing brake discs on the two now leading E-Types, particularly those of James Cottingham, because they have been glowing bright red the full length of the lap, the past few laps. These didn't look that much better, to be honest, as they jostled for position down into Woodcote. It'd be great to rejoin that battle. Has he got ahead? No, he hasn't. James Cottingham still leads now that the Wilmot car has pitted, or at least it will do when they come across the timing line. Look at those front brake discs on the E-Type, on the leading E-Type, I should say.
So through the traffic, there goes number 36, James Cottingham. What have we got left in the race? Just under 7 minutes. So Rob Huff has done the really hard yards here, hasn't he? He's gone onto the back of the leading car. Now, what can he do about finding a way past? James Cottingham, even if he's caught, certainly knows how to defend. There's also the traffic up the road. Look, because number 42 there, the Lotus Elite of now Richard Bradley, sports car star, is the next one to be negotiated. That Peter Jott, Harry Stiller, Peter Arundel, Lotus Elite. There it is, looking delectable in its Lotus livery. The green and yellow comes up towards the line, but what's the gap going to be between the two E-Types? Nothing at all virtually now. So they will put themselves into first and second before any potential penalties. Through they go. The gap half a second now between the pair. It's probably when, not if, Huff goes through.
Yeah, the little Elite just getting between them now. That will give James Cottingham some breathing space, but expect Rob Huff to close that down very quickly. He wastes no time getting past the Elite. tightening his line just a little bit on the way out of Madgwick. That'll compromise his current speed now through the flat-out run of Fordwater. Say flat out, depends how much those tyres are screaming. 5 minutes to go in this hour-long race. Particularly the rear tyres on all of these cars get worked extremely hard. You can just see, sadly, in the background, the stricken car of our former race leader, Gary Pearson.
And Huff there through the traffic, has a look to the inside again. The glowing brakes on the leading E-Type. James Cottingham still ahead as they all wag a wheel in the air. Back onto the power, they just put a lap on Sam Tordoff there in number 7 as the cars now accelerate down then towards Lavant. But you've got first and second then with a Damocletian investigation. The car that's third is 12 seconds back, but depending on any penalties coming these cars' way, might find itself benefiting out of all of that. Let us see. The car that's fifth didn't stop within the pit window, so there's trouble looming there as well. Quite a lot for the officials to sort out, either post-race or in the remaining 5 minutes. As here now, out of the chicane, Rob Huff again tries to mount the challenge, but interesting, isn't it, the way that he was able to bring the gap down and down and down and down, lap after lap after lap, but now he's got a bit stuck. He's just under a second adrift of James Cottingham. They dive through on the inside of the traffic, that lovely long shot as the cars round Madgwick, but Huffy can't quite get close enough yet, admittedly, to make a move.
Well, James Cottingham, full of courage on the brakes there as he went up the inside past the back marker. Got a little bit twitchy at the back end of the car, nearly ran out of road, but got it turned beautifully, rotated fully and hard on the power, reopened that gap to Huff as they exited Madgwick. Dario Franchitti now running in nice clean air in the short wheelbase Ferrari, 4th overall at the moment. Don't think he's in sight of his brother Marino, 1 position ahead, currently in the E-Type in 3rd.
Yeah, his last lap was a 31.6, so he's still lapping quicker than the Cobra. There it is, that gap's 7 seconds. So I think Dario's going to be safe. Pat Blakeney-Edwards pushing on, as ever he does, of course. Marino Franchitti's last lap was a personal best in 3rd spot, number 1 E-Type that he took over from Gregor Fiskin. So 3 3/4 minutes are still to run. There is the number 65 Cobra. It's 4.2, not 4.7 litre car, bear in mind, under the regulations for the pre-63 GT race that we have, this Stirling Moss Memorial Trophy. Right, there is Huff. His front brakes looking as though they would quite like a breather as well, and he's inching up once more onto the tail of James Cottingham as they come down up towards the completion of the lap.
Cottingham doing a fantastic job out ahead. I don't know how he's managing to keep this pace up, given just how bright and red those brake discs are. Surely the pedal is going long, surely the brake fade is severe. But you'd never have guessed it looking at the way he's going. He's managing to keep none other than Rob Huff at bay, or at least he is for now. Huff decisive in the back marker traffic, straight up the inside into Fordwater. That was a hole created by James Cottingham. Rob Huff taking full advantage, has the advantage now on momentum into No Name. Cottingham going defensive, Huff up the inside. Cottingham not afraid to turn in and chop the nose off of the fixed head coupe behind. Fantastic.
So Rob Huff now throwing everything at this. He's done the catching and he's got a bit bored being sat there behind James Cottingham. The traffic gave him an opportunity. He wasn't able to take advantage of it, but Cottingham now really feeling the pressure. He slides the car out of Lavant then, so the E-Types battling, still tied together. 0.166 of a second was the margin at that last sector, and actually in a straight line. Does Cottingham just get away a little bit? That car just seems to be able to stretch its legs ever so slightly, but the last of the late breakers, Rob Huff, look, will come back at him as they head into Woodcote. They're going to be able to squeeze just about 2 more laps out of this as there Cottingham comes through, but you can see how the gap has come down out of Woodcote now towards the chicane, and again look, under braking, Rob Huff gets right up behind the back of the leading E-Type then, so the gap much reduced. It was 9/10 at the start of the lap. As they come through now to put 34 in the book, the gap is down to half a second. Another back marker. They've got the traffic and they've got the fading light to contend with as around Madgwick they go. So Rob Huff, knowing that he's running out of time in the race, they can possibly squeeze 1 more lap in at the end of this, but he's got to hustle on just in case.
Seeing a general pattern emerge between these two drivers. Rob Huff seems to be a little quicker on corner entry, but James Cottingham, neater, tidier, gets it all sorted out sooner on the apex. He's a little bit quicker out, which is why we're seeing the gap between them extend as they go down the straights.
Now this was the part of the circuit a lap ago where he was very committed, and he's so again at St Mary's there, trying to get his nose up the inside, couldn't do it. Slides towards Lavant, then over the rise, over the brow again. Rob Huff's E-Type barely in a straight line, more glowing brakes on the Cottingham car. more noticeable than on Rob Huff's second place, number 12 E-Type then, as they accelerate out of 11th corner, onto 11th straight, down to Woodcote. Less than a minute to go, so fingers crossed it will not need a flag this time. We can squeeze one more lap out of it, which will be bad news possibly for James Cottingham, maybe good news for Rob Huff. And again, on that section of circuit, the gap does widen a touch between the two of them, but what about under braking? Here comes Huff, and the gap comes down and down and down and down and down, and he's right on the tail of Cottingham. Is there a chance to challenge as they come into the chicane? James just about gets the car on the right line defence from Huff, who's always quick through here. So 20 seconds on the clock now. Up towards the line they come. It is James Cottingham just hanging on to the advantage as they power their way across the line. And the gap as they start the last lap is 0.2 of a second. And here comes Huff sideways under braking. Tries the outside line, still can't do it.
No, he had to brake harder than he had anticipated, which is why the tail snapped wide. James Cottingham, I think, now finally having to nurse his brakes, braking a little earlier, a little softer, a longer braking zone for Cottingham. Now, if he can pull just enough of a gap through this backside of the circuit, he might be able to defend down into Woodcote at the end of the straight. But Huffy tries to go around the outside on the marbles. Cottingham sees it coming, lets the car drift wide to close the door into the left-hander of St Mary's.
And let's see whether or not they're going to encounter any traffic on this lap as well. If they are, there are back markers ahead. Now, don't forget, Huff tends to lose out in a straight line here, but he's so good on the brakes. If he's able to stay right on the back of Cottingham now, he builds up for a chance then. So the flag will be out this time. It is the last lap of the Stirling Moss Memorial Trophy. It is James Cottingham versus Rob Huff. Cottingham looking in his mirrors. He does get away in a straight line, but there are back markers up the road. Is that going to help or hinder? Let's see as they come down to Woodcote. The light is fading. The gap is diminishing between the top two as well. Cottingham tries to get up the inside of Woodcote. Is the back marker going to see him coming? Yes, Rob Huff tries to commit. Which way does he go? Rob dives up the inside. Cottingham has got through. Huff gets through as well. It's going to be a drag to the line, but James Cottingham has just done enough, has he? Yes, he has. It is going to be a Stirling Moss Memorial Trophy win for James Cottingham, and Harvey Stanley ahead of Rob Huff and Richard Mines. What a battle.